You need to be able to accurately assess your read of the fight and your breakdown of the fight after the fight ends in order to make the relevant changes to your strategy to actually make money long term and not make money for 6 months or 1 year. What is up, everyone? We are back again for another edition of the Lucrative MMA Betting Show. This is going to be the final episode of the year, unless I decide to come back and do a crazy PFL episode or something like that, because we only have one more UFC event to end the year. That's UFC Tampa going down this Saturday, December the 14th, and I absolutely cannot wait for it. I'm a sucker for any UFC event, but for the final event of the year, I am doing my best to make sure that we profit and I give you some good picks and predictions. This weekend we got Colby Covington taking on Joaquin Buckley in the main event matchup, and I feel like if this fight had happened a couple of years ago, the consensus will be completely different on what it is at the moment. So I'm very excited to speak to you about that one. In the co-main event, we got two UFC veterans at this point, Quarantillo against Swanson, going head-to-head in a matchup that I'm sure will bring fireworks to the octagon. Manel Kape's on the card, Miguel Josephine nuts, and so it's definitely a decent UFC card to end the year. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's break down these fights and hopefully make some money. So as mentioned, the main event is Colby Covington taking on Joaquin Buckley. Colby Covington has a record of 17-4, with Joaquin Buckley having a record of 20-6. Straight off the bat, it's pretty interesting that Buckley has a better record than Colby Covington. I mean, at least more wins. In my head, Covington has way more wins than Buckley. When we take a look over at the odds, they got Joaquin Buckley coming in as a massive favourite at -270, with the underdog price of +230 for Colby Chaos Covington. Now, as I said at the start of the show, if this fight was a couple of years ago, I think we'd see a complete reverse in the lines, with Colby Chaos Covington being the -270 favourite and Buckley being a +230 underdog. But at the end of the day, Father Time waits for no man, and we have seen Colby Covington on a bit of a downslide in his recent fights, and that's shown up in his performances, to be honest. Whereas Buckley is the complete opposite. He has been riding a money train at the moment. If you've been betting on Joaquin Buckley, you have been cashing big, and we definitely have. I bet on him in his last fight against Stephen Thompson, where he got a beautiful knockout, and to be honest, I don't actually think that was a good bet. I think that was a bad bet that cashed, but end of the day, we still made the money. I also bet on him against Vicente Luque as an underdog, and those are two good wins. You know, they're clean wins. Both wins, he deserved the wins. Regardless of the odds, he performed well and finished two veterans, and we've just seen that Luque isn't completely done, as he choked out Themba Gorimbo just a couple of days ago. So that's really what the fight comes down to, man. I mean, you got one fighter surging, riding a momentum wave at the moment, and you got Colby Covington, who seems to be potentially showing up for a paycheck. He's definitely not all there physically, and it's tough to say he's all there mentally as well. This is a striker and a wrestler matchup, right? So we can look at it from the momentum aspect, as I've mentioned. You know, we can look at it from the age aspect, etc. But we need to look at it stylistically as well. As I always say, boys, there's only 3 ways to cap a fight, right? That's stylistically, statistically, and intangibly, right? So we can look at the intangibles and say that Numancer is coming in with a lot of confidence. He's got some good wins recently. He's in form. He's in shape. We can look at it statistically, talking about the record, talking about the reach, talking about the age advantage. But stylistically, for the most part, is what makes up the majority of the fight. Not all the time, but for most fights, stylistics are the most important. For most fights. I think for this fight, the intangibles are probably a little bit more important. But let's look at it stylistically for a moment. Colby Covington is a wrestler and Numancer is a striker. We've got a striker and wrestler matchup in this match. Make no mistake about it. Buckley is going to be doing his best to stay at range, stop himself from backing up against the fence, and defending all the takedowns from Chaos Covington. Covington should, if he wants to win this fight, pressure, throw a lot of volume, and go back to the vintage Colby. Heavy pressure, heavy volume, forward pace, never getting tired, spamming takedowns. Because if he does that, he's got a chance to beat anyone in this division. I just feel like at this point in their career, the intangibles are going to outweigh the stylistics a little bit. I will say this though, if Colby Covington manages to get top time, he most certainly could keep Numancer down, because there is not a lot of footage of Numancer on the bottom. But the footage I have seen is not good. You know, I have to go back to some of his Bellator fights to see him really grounded on the bottom and kind of exposed there. And I do expect that he's got better since then. I've seen some glimpses of that, but I still think that he doesn't have a great ground game, at least when he's on his back. He has some great ground and pound from top position and stuff, but you know, when he's on his back, I don't think he has a great ground game. So Colby Covington definitely has a chance to get him down and do some damage from top position, but he doesn't have great control himself either. So even if he does get him down, I think the physicality and the athleticism of Buckley probably will get him back to his feet, whereas maybe 3 or 4 years ago it wouldn't have done that because Colby could match the athleticism at least to some degree. I think the athleticism gap is so big right now that we're going to see that play out quite brutally in the octagon. I think that Buckley's going to land heavy shots in this fight, and I think that he's got a very good chance of KOing Colby Chaos Covington. Colby was never the best striker. He was never the most sophisticated in striking defense. You know, he's been rocked multiple times in the UFC. He got rocked badly by a washed Jorge Masvidal. He almost got finished in that fight, and I won't say almost finished, but he got hurt very, very badly, right? I want to emphasize that point. He completely dominated the fight and still almost was on the verge of being knocked out. If you go back and look at his Kamaru Usman fights, again, rocked badly in those fights, finished in one of those fights. Whether you say it's an early stoppage or not, I mean, the guy was hurt, and that is by a wrestler with freak power. Buckley's a striker. You know, Buckley's a striker, and I think that he's going to be able to land here. And not to mention, those fights were 3-4 years ago. This is 2024, damn near 2025. So I do not expect Colby Covington's chin to have miraculously improved. I do not expect Colby Covington to be way better at striking defense. I think that the same shots that Kamaru Usman and Jorge Masvidal landed, I think Buckley has the skill set to land those as well, and maybe even more brutal shots. Numancer comes in and throws like 100 shots in one exchange. Like, his combos are amazing, you know, go to the body, up to the head, up to the body, spinning wheel kick. I mean, the guy is very, very athletic, very, very dynamic, and he doesn't have great technicality. He doesn't set his shots up that well. He doesn't even deal with range that well, but the sheer volume, power, and pressure and physicality that he can show in the octagon is more than enough to beat Colby Chaos Covington in this fight, in my opinion, and actually probably get a knockout. So yeah, that's really my breakdown, boys. I mean, I think Colby Covington has a chance of winning this fight if he shows up like he did 3-4 years ago. I just can't count on him to do that now. As I said, father time waits for no man, and I think Colby's best days are well behind him. I think the UFC know this. I think the UFC knows that he looked terrible in the Leon Edwards fight. Very, very timid. I mean, the guy's super inactive. He's literally had one fight for the past 4 years in each one of those years. So he had one fight in 2020, one in 2021, one in 2022, one in 2023, and almost none in 2024. You know, he's making one fight 2 weeks before the year ends. So the inactivity, the age, the downslide, this is just way too much to overcome. It was kind of like how I broke down the Kape Asakura versus Pantoja fight last week. So I predicted Pantoja to win via rear naked choke. So hopefully some of you watched that breakdown and cashed on that. And one of the big reasons why I predicted that was because Kape Asakura is making his debut in the UFC, fighting the best fighter in the division on his debut, coming in from an organization that doesn't even use octagons, doesn't even use cages. They use the ring. And we literally saw in the fight, Pantoja use the cage to bounce off and take the back of Kape Asakura. And that's literally almost word for word what I predicted in my breakdown. It was just too much to overcome. Pantoja's used to using the cage, and we saw that in the fight. And I'm calling that again. I think Colby Covington has way too much to overcome to actually put on the performance he needs to do to beat Buckley. So I'm calling Buckley as the winner here, and probably by KO. The next fight on the card, we have Cub Swanson taking on Billy Quarantillo. Now, Cub Swanson is an absolute veteran of the sport, and he has a record of 29 wins with 14 losses. That might be the most fights of any fighter on the entire card. He's facing Billy Quarantillo, who has a record of 18 wins and 6 losses. Now we look at the odds, and it's got Billy Quarantillo as a -153 favorite with the underdog price tag of Cub Swanson at +133. So this is a very interesting fight for me, boys, because obviously we got two fighters who I believe are on the tail ends of their career at the moment. I mean, if we look at their recent performances, I think that the best days are behind them. But it doesn't mean they can't go in there and have a banger. I do think this fight is probably going to be fireworks. I mean, 90% of Billy Quarantillo fights are exciting, and 95% of Cub Swanson fights are exciting. So I don't see a world in which this is not going to be a captivating fight, an exciting fight. Billy only knows how to fight one way, and that is with pressure, moving forward, and just putting a crazy pace and volume on his opponents. Cub Swanson is the same, man. He stands and bangs. He has got good footwork. You know, he will switch stances. He'll stay on the outside. And if you let him work from range, he'll definitely do some good damage there. But at the end of the day, the guy loves firefights. I mean, I know you guys remember that Do Ho Choi fight from back in the day, and look where Do Ho Choi has gone these days. He's looking very, very good recently. But yeah, go back to that 2016, I believe it was, fight. If you want some fireworks, that's the only fight you need to watch. It's an amazing fight, and I try and watch it at least once a year. Cub's been trading wins and losses for the last 5 years of his career, and he's had some decent showings in fights that people thought he wasn't going to do very well in. The fight against Andre Fili last time out was a very, very close fight. He was a big underdog in that fight, plus 185, and he made it look close. The fight against Hakeem Dawodu, the fight before that, was a very, very close fight as well. He was a plus 185 underdog, and although I believe that he lost that fight and he was awarded a judge's decision, he still didn't look plus 185. He made it close because he's still got that power. He's got that big power, he can hurt you, and he's got that veteran savvy, man. He's not going to go away. You need to put him out. You need to Giga Jakatsi, kick him in the liver and knock him out to actually dominate him, because if he's in there for 15 minutes, he's going to give you hell, man. He's going to give you hell. I think this fight will probably be determined by how much pace and pressure can Billy put on Cub without getting hurt. Because Cub's going to need to create distance and hit Billy with some big, big shots to stop that forward pace and pressure. If he doesn't do that, I don't see him having the necessary footwork to evade Billy all fight like Yusuf Salau did, before finishing him. He also had the takedowns and the grappling to kind of offset Billy's rhythm, to which Cub Swanson doesn't really have. So Swanson, in my eyes, is going to need to keep range and land heavy shots at Billy. And that's not really going to be hard, because Billy Quarantillo, I'm not going to call him a punching bag, but I will say that everybody he fights lands many shots on him. I don't think I've seen a Billy Quarantillo fight where he just doesn't get hit or doesn't get hurt. I'm sure there's been a couple over the years. He's had many fights, but for the most part, the guy gets hit a lot, even in fights that he wins and even looks dominant in. He's still getting smashed in those fights at times. So I think, especially early, Cub's can have some upside. I think Cub is the better striker. I think he's going to land some big shots. He may even knock out Billy Quarantillo. It is possible, but Cub hasn't got a knockout in a long time outside of that Darren Elkins one. And, it's good to knock out Darren Elkins, but Darren Elkins is just so much levels below Cub on the feet that it was pretty easy for him to do that. I do think Billy Quarantillo's fresher, he brings more of a pace, more of a volume in the striking, and I think that will upset Cub's rhythm a little bit, whereas Darren doesn't really bring much in the striking outside of a little overhand, a couple of jabs. He's mainly a wrestler. So yeah, if Quarantillo can get past the heavy strikes of Swanson and the footwork, then I think he's going to be able to go to work in the clinch. Big knees to the body, big elbows to the head, and I think this can slow down a 41-year-old Cub Swanson. Swanson is getting on now. He's not going to be performing at this level for much longer. I think, he's 41 years old, boys. Do you really think he's going to be doing this at 44? I highly doubt it, so that means that he can fall off a cliff at any moment. He already has a little bit. We've seen time and time again, this guy just gets hurt to the body. He just can't take body shots. And Billy Quarantillo, he doesn't have great striking, but he will knee to the body. He will throw some body kicks. He will throw heavy volume because he doesn't mind getting into grappling scenarios, because he usually ends up on top, and he just likes that high-paced action. So yeah, it's a tough one for me, boys. I'm going to go with the underdog in this one. I'm going to go with Cub Swanson. I think he's got more knockout upside early, and obviously all fights start early, so I think Billy's going to have to come through some heavy shots to win the fight, and at the end of the day, we've seen him finished in the UFC before. I think he could be finished again. I think he's going to be hurt here, which maybe could potentially change the outcome of the fight. If he gets smacked on the eye and he has a massive cut and it swells up, that could impact the entire fight, like in Rebecki versus Oralby. On top of that, Cub Swanson has good enough takedown defense to probably stop the takedowns from Billy Quarantillo, in my opinion. So it's really just going to be that mid-range to where can Quarantillo put the pace and pressure on Cub, or can Cub offset that with damage? And based on the odds, I'm going to go with Cub. I feel like the fight should be a bit closer to a pick'em. I feel like the fight could be lying Billy Quarantillo minus 120 or something. At the moment, he's minus 153. So I think there's some slight value on Cub here. It's a tough one for me though, boys. It's a tough one because I think it's a very close fight and either fighter could win it. And it's very hard to back someone who's 41 years old, especially against a pace and pressure fighter like Billy Quarantillo. But it's what it is, boys. I'm not going to speak about this one forever. I'm picking another underdog in a co-main event. Last week we picked Ian Gary. Obviously that was a very different fight. It was plus 300 instead of plus 120 odds, or plus 130 or whatever it is. so it was easier for me to pick Ian Gary. I also think that was a very, very good pick post-fight. He was very unlucky to not get that win. And I am going to go back to the well and pick another underdog in the co-main event. I'm probably as confident that Cub Swanson gets the decision as I was Gary gets the decision, but Cub Swanson's plus 130 and Gary is plus 300. So it's a little bit of a risk if I am going to put money on him. It's not impossible, but I'm going to take some time to decide. As always, boys, you have to understand that these YouTube breakdowns are only my early thoughts. You know, I'm going to go back, I'm going to do more research, I'm going to look into the fights heavily, a lot more deeply, and make my decision as the week moves on. But yeah, for my early prediction, I'm going to give Cub Swanson the edge in a very close fight. Next fight is Manel Kape versus Bruno Silva, and boy, is this a banger. This could potentially be my most anticipated fight on the card. I mean, we're going to speak about another fight that could take the cake, but this is definitely up there, definitely top 2, top 3 at worst. So we got Manel Kape with a 19-7 record. That's a lot of losses for Kape, man. In my head, he's only got like 3 or 4 losses, but yeah, 19-7 record, with the record of Bruno Silva sitting at 14-5-2. Currently, they got Manel Kape as the massive favorite, as we usually see Kape at, minus 340, with the underdog price on Bruno Silva at plus 280. Plus 280 on Bruno Silva is always intriguing. I don't care who that guy is fighting, you know, it's always going to intrigue me a little bit. But getting into the matchup, it does seem like a decent matchup for Manel Kape. And the reason is pretty simple. Bruno Silva gets hit a hell of a lot. You know, he's a very, very tough guy. He's a pit bull. You know, he's going to take one shot and give one shot back. But against someone like Manel Kape, it's definitely a risky approach. We have seen some fighters have some semblance of success doing that against Manel Kape. You know, most notably Felipe dos Santos. He made it close and sticky at times with the ability to just take one and walk forward with that shootbox style. And Bruno Silva's kind of similar, to be honest. You know, he definitely gets hit on the feet, but man, he hits very hard. He has a lot of power himself. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him put Manel Kape in some sticky spots in this fight. On top of that, you know, Manel Kape is basically known for low volume and inconsistency. I mean, there's been so many fights now where he just doesn't throw shots. I remember his debut against Pantoja. I bet on Pantoja there. And I bet on Pantoja because I thought he was going to be able to grapple him. It ended up being a striking affair for the most part. And he lost a striking affair. So yeah, shout out to Pantoja for cashing me that. But at the end of the day, I didn't think that I would be winning a striking match against Manel Kape. So I can't even take credit for that bet because the read was wrong. Whether it cashed or not is way less important than the actual read. And this is what I try and tell everybody who's sports betting, but people don't understand this. And especially in the year of the favorite, in the year of the minus EV, which is 2024, you know, a lot of minus EV bets have been cashing. People just seem to believe that it's not really about the read. It's not about the odds. It's all about the result. But we have to understand that the result, extrapolated out over the long term, is always going to come back to your read. It's not going to come back to whether they won or not, because lots of things can impact that. You know, a fighter can get a random injury in the fight. The judges can give terrible decisions like they do almost every week. Like last week, at the end of the day, Alexander Volkov was a great bet, a plus 300, even though it lost. Ian Gary was a great bet, a plus 300, even though it lost. Very important to understand these things. And I understand these things heavily. And it's basically what has enabled me to make a full-time living off gambling for many, many years. So just a little disclaimer, if you are ever betting on a fight, you need to be able to accurately assess your read of the fight and your breakdown of the fight after the fight ends in order to make the relevant changes to your strategy to actually make money long term and not make money for 6 months or 1 year. So you know I always have to drop a bit of wisdom in there, boys. But let's get back to the fight. Manel Kape versus Bruno Silva. Like I said, Manel Kape can be low volume. And if he is low volume here, Bruno Silva may be able to get off on a good start and land some shots. I just think though, at some point in this fight, Manel Kape's going to land some heavy, heavy blows. You know, it might be a flying knee like he did against Ode Osborne. It might be a beautiful 1-2 like he was just lining up Felipe dos Santos with that all night. The other X factor in this fight is obviously the grappling, because Manel Kape has been grappled in his career. He has lost many times from grappling in his career, even way back in Ryzen to his UFC career against people like Makayev and Mateus Nicolau. And Bruno Silva has the grappling in his back pocket here now. Do I think that he'll be able to take down Kape consistently? Probably not, man. Kape is very athletic. He's very light on his feet, but that is something to take into account. You know, Bruno Silva definitely has that in his back pocket. So just that alone maybe makes it seem as if he shouldn't be this big of an underdog. But at the end of the day, if we go back and look at Cody Durden versus Bruno Silva, which was Bruno Silva's last fight, I just really didn't like the way Durden was just tuning Bruno Silva up on the feet. You know, he was bullying him on the feet. He was making him look amateur. And Durden's not the best striker of all time. You know, he's aggressive, but he's not a great striker. We've seen him beat up in the striking many times in his UFC career. Go back to the Chris Gutierrez fight on his debut, all the way to his last fight against Joshua Van a couple of days ago, getting beaten in striking. So it wasn't a good look for me to see Bruno Silva get that. But some people just, they don't perform well on the day. And at the end of the day, he's still got a knockout. He still won via striking in that fight, right? So yeah, it's tough because I think recency bias tells me that Bruno Silva's not going to win the fight, you know, based on the Cody Durden performance. But at the end of the day, I do think the line could be, I do think the line is wide. Plus 280 is wide. I think he's got a chance to get the grappling going. I think he can land heavy shots, maybe a knockout himself. Probably not a knockout. I mean, Kape is so durable, but definitely he could wobble him. You know, I've seen him wobbled before, so I think he could wobble him. And it just seems like a dangerous striking fight where one fighter has the upside on the grappling, which is Bruno Silva. So yeah, I think Bruno Silva is a potential underdog shot. I'm not definitely going to play it. I think Manel Kape's going to win. I just think he's too much of a sharp shooter. I think he's too accurate. I think he's too athletic. I think he hits too hard. And I think that his durability is too much to lose this fight. But it's impossible to predict the future. All we can do, or all that is way easier to do, is accurately assess where the value is. And I do believe that Bruno Silva is a good underdog. You know, he's going to fight for your money. He definitely has a chance to win the fight via knockout, via submission, or even via decision. So, you know, when I'm looking at underdogs and I see he can win the fight 3 ways, it's definitely a positive to add to them. But yeah, I'll pick Manel Kape at this point in time in an absolute banger of a match. So next fight on the card, we have Dustin Jacoby versus Vitor Petrino. Dustin Jacoby has a record of 19-9-1, and Vitor Petrino has a record of 11-1. And the one for Jacoby was a no contest. This motherfucker's got 9 losses. Currently, we've got Vitor Petrino as a massive favorite yet again at -310, and Dustin Jacoby as a big underdog with a price tag at +260. I don't have much to say about this one, guys. You know, like, this is not a fight that I'm looking at with any semblance of confidence. Now, will I make a play on the fight? Well, that completely depends on the lines at the end of the day. You know, I might not have a lot of confidence on the way a fight will go, but one fight is +400. So I'll definitely take the shot because anything can happen, right? But in this fight, I'm not going to look to play anything unless there's a big line. Like, you ain't going to see me playing -300s in this fight. It's just a weird one. I do think Petrino wins. I do think he's the better fighter. I think that he's got way more ways to win. I think he can win via knockout because he does hit quite hard. I think he can win with his grappling because he's very physical. He's a raw freak. He can probably take Jacoby down, even though Jacoby is a good anti-wrestler, you know, coming from that kickboxing background, that glory background. He's definitely got good takedown defense. But man, I just see multiple ways for Petrino to win this fight, and I don't see multiple ways for Jacoby to win this fight. Obviously, he can win via knockout, but the guy's a decision machine. He's probably going to have to outpoint and stay at range for 15 minutes. And do I really trust him to do that? I don't. This is a weird fight for me, boys. I'm going to call Vitor Petrino as the winner, but I don't have any care in the world to even watch this fight, let alone bet on it. But I'm going to have that disclaimer here. I may make a bet if the odds are wide enough. For example, if they're giving me Vitor Petrino KO at +1000, that's an instant bet for me. I know they're not going to do that. I'm just trying to explain to you that even right now, I'm saying that I don't want to bet on this fight. I don't care about this fight. It all comes down to the odds, my brothers. So let's move on to the next fight. Vitor Petrino is the winner, if you didn't get it. The next fight is a banger, and this might take the cake above Manel Kape Silva as the #1 fight I'm looking forward to this weekend. We've got Daniel Marcos coming in with a record of 16-0. You know, we gotta love those undefeated fighters, against Adrian Yanez with a record of 17-5. Currently, they have Daniel Marcos as the favorite at -175. The underdog price tag on Adrian Yanez coming back at +150. This is a banger, and Daniel Marcos is my boy. I bet on him in his debut against Oliveira, and we cashed there at +140 underdog. And I've also bet on him multiple times throughout his UFC career after that. I think he's a very, very good fighter. He's a fighter that I love because he's a striker with beautiful eyes, amazing timing, great range management, very good in the clinch, brutal knees. I mean, the front kicks, like, the guy has it all in the striking, to be honest. Adrian Yanez, on the other hand, is a striker as well. You know, he came in to the UFC with a bang. He was meant to be this massive prospect, but he kind of got shut down when he took on Rob Font, you know, a brutal knockout there, and subsequently lost via leg kicks in one of his recent fights against Jonathan Martinez. And obviously that wasn't a good look there, you know, because he seemed like he didn't know how to defend a leg kick, which obviously not good at this up echelon of the UFC. And he better have learned, man, because I'll tell you one thing, Daniel Marcos throws some decent leg kicks. So this fight's going to be a banger, first of all. You know, I can't wait for this fight. I am a little bit biased to Marcos because I think he's a really good fighter, and he's just made me a lot of money, and I just like his style. So I'm always going to root for him. But it's definitely a tough fight for him, because one thing I will say about Marcos, and this is completely unbiased from me, right, is that he slows down badly. He doesn't have good cardio. In fact, he has bad cardio. You know, he slows down in round 3 almost every fight. I remember on the Contender Series, and I went and watched this again the other day because I wanted to see how bad it was. The Contender Series fight, he slowed down in round 3, and I mean, he was piecing that dude up for the first 2 rounds, Brandon Lewis, but in the 3rd round, he just slowed down. He just did not look good. You know, he was getting pressured. He wasn't looking good, and it was a bad sign. And then you go back to the Davy Grant fight. Again, he slows down in round 3. It's like, I don't think he has shored up those cardio issues. And one thing about Yanez is that he will take a beating and come back and push late. He has elite cardio, in my opinion. You know, we saw in the Randy Costa fight, he was getting brutalized for the 1st round, and then he just came back in round 2 and broke him. And that's just from cardio, durability, toughness. So I definitely think cardio, durability, toughness is on the side of Adrian Yanez here. But I think skill-wise, Marcos is a level above him. You know, I think he's way better in the clinch. I think he can butcher him in the clinch. I think the leg kicks are going to be there all day. And I think he has better eyes here. You know, I think he's going to be able to slip and rip a lot better. Now, if the fight gets close range and Marcos isn't able to use the clinch, then it's going to be a very good competition in the boxing, in the pocket boxing, because Yanez is a boxer. His whole game is pocket boxing. You know, he's very good in the boxing. He throws his shots very strange, you know, like very MMA boxing oriented. He doesn't really put his hips into it. He kind of just throws with his hands. But man, they look heavy, heavy shots. You know, he's knocked out many people in that range. So I do think that's dangerous for Marcos if he's closing range here. But I think Marcos is smart enough to close range and, you know, throw the clinch strikes when he needs to and gets out of range and kind of just jabs his face up. I think the jab is going to be there all day for Marcos. I think the leg kicks are going to be there all day. I think Marcos is going to win the fight. But I would be scared to bet on Marcos if the fight gets into round 3, because I could definitely see Yanez putting some heavy combinations together and walking Marcos down in round 3. But Marcos has 2 rounds to knock him out, slow him down, discourage him, take his legs away, and also, you know, just win the first 2 rounds and then just survive in round 3. So I think, considering the early upside he has, not only in a finish inside the distance wise, but also just in a winning rounds upside, I think I have to pick Marcos here. Marcos via decision would kind of be the most likely outcome because Yanez is shown to be so tough. But at the end of the day, when you've been stopped with head punches in round 1 by someone who doesn't hit that hard in Rob Font, I mean, he hits hard, but it's not like this rocket puncher, which Yanez made him look like. When you've been stopped by leg kicks, then you just have to pump the brakes on betting that guy to not get finished again, especially when he's outskilled here, in my opinion. So I'll take Marcos. I think it's a very compelling fight, a very good fight, but I do think Marcos is going to get the win here and move to 17-0, and I think Yanez gets another loss on his record. There is one more fight on the main card. It's Navajo Stirling versus Tuco Tokkos. I haven't tape studied Tokkos, so I ain't going to speak too much about it. I do know him though. We have seen him fight once before. Navajo Stirling comes from CKB, comes from Auckland, which is the city I live in now in New Zealand. So I know a lot about his camp. I know some of his training partners, etc. So, you know, I never go into those camps, or I never go into those fighters too much. Prediction will be Stirling via knockout. I think he's way better than this dude. So yeah, not much to say outside of Stirling via knockout in that one. But yeah, that's it, boys. The last lucrative MMA betting show of the year has come to an end. I hope you have enjoyed these betting shows. I sincerely hope you have cashed some money watching my breakdowns. I hope you've had some entertainment watching my breakdowns. If you want to sign up for the last card of the year, you can go to my website, lucrativemmabetting.com, and you can sign up for a 1-week package, which means you get access to all of my bets, all of my long shots, all of my props, my parlays, underdogs, regional scene, everything for 1 week. You don't have to sign up for the whole month. And yeah, you can come and cash with us, come and join the website, find out what it's all about. But outside of that, like, subscribe, comment, all of that rubbish. And yeah, if you would like to see a little PFL breakdown from me or something after the UFC is finished, because we still got many events this year. We got many events. We got many regional scene events. PFL is on. Rising is on the end of year 1. If you want to see maybe a breakdown of some of those organizations after the UFC has ended, then definitely chuck me a comment below so I know. If there's enough comments, if there's enough likes, I will potentially look to do that. But that's it, boys. Good luck on your bets, and I will see you in the next video. Boom. Peace.